Greetings and welcome to this segment of Bring It On. My name is Bob Hayes and I'm going to be a host for today's show. I have a candidate for school committee in Hanson, Kara Moser. Kara, how are you?
I'm good, Bob. How are you? Nice to see you.
Good. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
We're here to give the viewers a little snapshot of who you are. So if you could just tell us, kids, where you live in Hanson and on,
Sure.
and give what you do.
Sure.
People are very interested, and we always have these questions come out. So have at it.
Sure. So my name's Kara Moser. My husband and I have lived with our 3 kids in Hanson since 2015. And prior to that, we spent 5 years living in Whitman. So we have a lot of ties to both communities, which has been really, really nice. We have 3 kids. Our oldest is graduating high school this spring, and then we have twins who are headed to Whitman-Hanson as freshmen in the fall. So, we've had a lot of experience with the different schools throughout the district, which has been a really nice opportunity. In addition to that, I'm a career educator. I have been a teacher for 16 years. The majority of those have been spent teaching 4th grade in Cohasset. So needless to say, I think my personally and professionally, a huge part of my adult life has been spent thinking about children and educating children and supporting the kind of best interests of the next generation. I also have, my parents also live in Hanson, and so I also have the perspective of retirees and that generation as well. So I feel like I have kind of a broad perspective on a lot of that.
Well, that answers a lot of my second question. What makes you want to jump into the fire pit? And as you know, with budgets and this time of the year, it's always been a very volatile situation because it's a tough juggle.
Yeah.
What makes you want to do it, other than you gave us a great background of, in all good reasons?
Yes.
I mean, I know at one point back in, I think you told me 15 or 16, you were part of the Save Our Schools.
Yeah, so I've obviously education's really important to me, and back when my children were in elementary school, kind of coming out of seeing that there were areas where the district maybe could fund services and support our students in a way that's more commensurate with other neighboring districts. We formed kind of a grassroots organization, or a grassroots group, really, of concerned parents and community members who our focus was really on advocating for a budget that felt educationally sound for our students, that we were providing them opportunities that we believed would help them be successful. And that really kind of kick-started my experience with, or my involvement with the Whitman-Hanson schools. And that process has not always been easy or linear, but I'm really, really proud of a lot of the ripple effects and the different ways that we have continued to kind of move that conversation forward over the last 8 years. In addition to that, I've really tried to be an active volunteer in our school communities. I've been on the PTO. I've been on school councils. I have participated in several principal search committees as a parent rep. So I've really tried to be actively involved in the school community. And really be listening to kind of both communities, Whitman and Hanson, and understanding educationally what is going well and what's challenging, but also from a community and thinking about the budget issue. I know obviously is always a challenge, and I think we're in a season where we're seeing a lot of districts that are struggling with maintaining a budget that they feel like can support the needs of their students. And so I think that's always a conversation, and it's always a dialogue, and there's a lot of pieces to it that are really complex. But I feel like at this point, I feel like personally and professionally, I have the bandwidth and the capacity to commit to supporting the district and our towns in a maybe more formal way than I have in the past. So I was excited when the opportunity for school committee came available and kind of jumping right in.
Okay, well, great. And in your, did you say 15 or 16 years
Yes.
as an educator?
Yeah.
How have you seen schools change? It's difficult for people that don't have school children, we'll say. I mean, when I first got involved, it opened my eyes and I had no idea.
Yes.
I just, you know.
Yeah.
And just in the fact of IEPs, individual education plans, what was school like 16 years ago and how much different is it today? It may give the people more of a snapshot of what you go through on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis and how you might be able to help a district as a school committee member. I know this is a 14-tiered question because I just came,
All the
but
things.
but it all wraps
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
You know, because it's all important for people to know and understand what your perspective is going to be as an educator coming into a district that has the same problems as you just said 2 minutes ago
Yeah.
that all these other towns are experiencing.
Yes.
It comes down to dollars.
Yeah. So I think that there's, I think that there are a number of things to think about. I think the beauty of education and also the challenge of education is that it is constantly changing. There is always there's always new research or new initiatives or new programs and most importantly new students, right? So education kind of requires us to be nimble and flexible in our thinking. And I think in addition to that, the pandemic exacerbated a lot of that. And so the education post-pandemic is different than it was, like many careers. And I think that everyone involved in education, parents, community members, teachers, are still kind of recalibrating ourselves and figuring out what education looks like and how we best support it in this post-COVID kind of era. And I think that you hear a lot about COVID learning gaps or COVID learning loss around academics, and that's certainly a component. You know, we want to continue to make sure to remediate those gaps with our students. But in addition to that, I think that there's also what I think about, we're preparing our students, whether it's for college or career, for a future that as adults is very different than maybe what our experience was, probably for careers that have not even been envisioned yet. And so beyond just the academics, I think that the role of schools in educating the whole child and really developing critical thinkers and helping them develop student skills is really, really important. And I think that's something that post-pandemic is also an emphasis in our schools, because these students not only had a fragmented year and a half academically, they had a fragmented year and a half socially, interpersonally, with like the kind of being in a classroom all day. So I think kind of helping support our students, not just around the academics, but also thinking about the whole student and thinking about ways that we can help them be creative problem solvers, be good communicators, have grit and perseverance in overcoming obstacles. All of those things I think are really important, and sometimes I think those are harder to quantify than the academic pieces, but they're really kind of prerequisite skills. So I think that's something that sometimes I think may show up from a budgetary standpoint as it may feel like fat or fluff around some of those supports that are in place, but I do think that they're critically needed around our students when we think about supporting them, their social emotional needs, supporting their mental health needs, supporting their student skills. So I think that's kind of, those are the big ideas I think about. I know that in addition to that, when you talk about IEPs, I know that special ed costs have gone up significantly in the past few years, and I think those are costs that are not, those are legally required costs, and as they should be, right, to support our students with disabilities and our students with special needs. And I think that that's a piece that the school committee and administration don't have control over. We need to meet the students and provide services to the students based upon their disability based upon their IEP or their 504. So I think that's a component too, certainly. And I think there are a lot of layers around, a lot of the different components of the budget, but that's certainly a big piece of it.
Well, it's a huge piece of it because we're going to get right to the next crux of all of what you're saying, and I'm trying to give the people from a point of view of an educator what goes on. Since COVID and then breaking out into the ESSER money, elementary and secondary, the money that was sent out, it's been said that the district hired tons of employees and DEI consultants and teachers and all kinds of things. And a lot of people, especially in a different segment of age, think that's not needed. And you just explained kind of in a nutshell before I got to that question of why it's needed. And that's kind of why I asked that. But it comes at a cost. So now, how do you juggle the cost? Because everybody has the same thing. And this is a difficult question, but you're a candidate for a $63 million budget. And people are lined up on this end, that end, and in the middle. And it's difficult because there are people on fixed incomes. I just interviewed a selectman, and he said his grandparents are 93 years old. God bless them. They're on a fixed income. There's younger people that are trying to buy a house that don't have any children yet, that the taxes and the interest rates. In fact, I think you know some stuff about interest rates because I think your husband's a RTC.
He works for, he's a banker, does commercial lending, yes.
That's what I thought. My bank, 48 years. I remember the name now. It's coming back to me.
All the dots are coming together.
So it's going to be your job, if elected, to try and juggle these things. And so it's going to put you in the mix. I know this is a difficult question, but I have to ask it because that's why we're here. How are you going to handle it?
So I think
you're going to have, I'm sorry for interrupting, I kind of didn't finish in my thought. You're going to have people pulling at you from here to here to here, and it's a juggle. I've been there. You go out one place and you run into somebody who says, great job, and you go out someplace and they go, we hate you.
Sure. I think that, when we talk about this year's budget, I think that while I certainly have, or this FY25 proposed budget, I think I certainly have some understanding of it, although I think the people that understand it best are school administration, the current school committee members, I think the boards of selectmen and the finance committees, and I think those conversations are challenging even for them who've been in the kind of the weeds of the line items and looking at the budgets and really thinking about how do we make this work, how do we collaborate, how do we give and take to make it happen. So I don't want to get too buried in the weeds around the budget, but what I do think is that the school committee's responsibility is to advocate for a budget that they feel provides the optimal education environment for our students. And so to that end, when they stand by the budget that they want to put forth to the towns, there's a level of respect I have for them around that. I also hear on the other side that the towns only have the bandwidth to shoulder so much of that before it impacts other town services or requires an override from our taxpayers. And I think this is a conversation that certainly comes up every year. I think that this year it's coming up in a slightly different way because of issues around kind of how ESSER funds were used, which are now not available anymore. Around I think we run a remarkably lean district, and I've always said that what our teachers especially do with the funds that they have is remarkable. I'm so impressed with the commitment of our educators in our district. And I think that as a district throughout the years, we have been really creative around how we have funded certain services, whether it's using grant funding or having, people wear multiple hats in different roles. And I think how the district chose to use ESSER funding, I think is is kind of up for debate. People have different opinions on that, but it's a factor in it. I think the other conversation that people always have is around the use of excess and deficiency. And so whether you use that in a way, that's really like your safety net. So how much of that should be used towards funding the operating budget versus keeping it in case, there's an unexpected huge expense that hits the district. I think at the same time, I get it. People are feeling the pressure of inflation, that we are largely a community, especially in Hanson, that relies almost exclusively on a residential tax base. We have very little commercial tax base. And so that puts the onus on our homeowners, which is hard, right? So in terms of what I think for this year, I still kind of would like to hear more from the conversations that are ongoing with the Board of Selectmen in Hanson in particular, although I know those conversations are also going on in Whitman and the school committee, and how those conversations continue to evolve as we get closer. But I think that, if the boards of selectmen and the finance committee move forward with proposing an override, I think that is one option for how they could close the gap. Are there other options? Potentially. I think that there's, collaboration that can happen, and there's negotiation that can happen. But I think that those ongoing conversations, I think everybody ultimately is trying to do right by their role. And I think the school committee is trying to do right with their mandate, and I think the boards of selectmen and the finance committee are trying to do right by their mandate, and I think sometimes there's a disconnect there, and those are conversations and collaborations that have to happen at the end of the day to help the towns run efficiently. So,
well, you've just practically summed it all up, because it is it's the white elephant in the room. Where do you go with it? The select board is in the middle. They have school district on one side, the parents on one side, the select board on another. There's 6 or 7 factions all going out and after it. And I'm not saying would you support an override, but you used the word, the term override, and that's always another word.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of letting the people decide?
I think yes. I think if that comes forward, then yes, I'm absolutely in favor of letting the people decide on an override, right? I think that ultimately, we want our voters to decide that. Would I personally vote for an override? I would like a little bit more information, but my values, if my values align with what the override is supporting, then I would be voting for it. And if I felt like financially my household could handle that increase in our tax rate, then I would vote for it. But I think I also have respect for people who might have a different opinion of that. And I think that the important thing for me is having those conversations continue and be ongoing, and ask the questions. I want people to ask the questions and have the conversations. I think there's a reliance on quick hits and social media posts, and not always really understanding the nuances of all of the factors that come into kind of making this work. So I think that those conversations are really important, and I think helping to educate people around it is really important.
Well, I think one of the problems that comes up, because I've been doing town meeting for over 30 years myself, and I was on the committee for 18.
Yeah.
Is when town meeting comes, we have 8,000 voters and we have 100, and you've seen us all get up and make phone
Trying to
calls.
get
Can you come here? Can you come? And then once the school vote's gone, the rest of the people get twisted because the school people just leave. It's like, we got what we want, we're out of here.
Yeah.
That kind of gives a bad vibe on the school people. And I understand all parts of it, because they have school children.
Yeah.
And they have babysitters. And I had spoken to, I think, all 3 of the candidates on the Board of Selectmen, and I'm just brainstorming, trying to help everyone.
Yeah.
How do we get more people to town meeting? Would it become earlier? Would it be? I mean, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Because 100 people make the decision
voters. Yeah.
for everyone, and it's millions and millions. I mean, the assessment to Hanson's $15,625,148.
Yeah. The whole town. Yeah.
The assessment to Whitman is $20,500,684, and they have the same problem in Whitman. It's not unique to either town. If you, because I've gone to other town people and said, "What do you do?" You know, brainstorming, trying to figure it out. And it's a difficult thing because they're all looking out for different outcomes.
Right.
So I'd love to see the school people obviously come up, but I'd also love to see them stay.
Yes.
I think they'd get more support from maybe some of the people who are against it. If they just said, hey, we're all in this together. How do we get that message across?
Well,
what do we tell the voters? I mean, you're trying to get elected to a position that by the time this conversation's over, you might say, I'm not sure, Bob.
I don't think so, Bob.
No,
I'm in it.
I'm loving to hear that. But.
So I think a couple things. I think town meeting is like a uniquely New England tradition, right? Like I think it stems from a different time, but it's also, as I won't name names, but as a former teacher in the Whitman Hanson School District who I highly respect said it's one of the purest forms of democracy. So it is, I think the challenge is a lot of times like I think all of us are so busy, whether we're parents or not. I think especially parents, everybody is highly scheduled and go, and I think it's tricky unless it's really I think sometimes unless it's something that you feel a personal relevance to you and your life, or it's immediately kind of in your face that this is happening, that could almost be missed altogether, which is really unfortunate. So I think communication around town meeting, I think, education around what town meeting is, education around the process. I mean, town meeting can be really interesting and entertaining to participate in.
It's entertaining.
And so I think that, I think there's a piece around that. I do think the logistics around parents, especially parents with young children, staying, I've been at town meetings that have gone to 10:30, almost 11 o'clock at night, and then reconvened the next night. So I think that is a big ask and a challenge for parents with young children in a way that might not be for other families. But I hear what you're saying, and I know that that's a real factor. I feel like when I have been part of groups that have advocated for moving for additional funding in our school budgets, we have always encouraged our groups to stay till the end for a multitude of reasons, because I think there's value in hearing those perspectives. There's value in hearing what other town departments need. There's value in hearing concerns and feedback, and so I think that yes, it's a challenge, and could maybe doing it earlier help get families there. I think that's possible. I think that's something to investigate. I think it's tricky, but I think a lot of it's around communication and around kind of making reducing the barriers for people as much as possible. I know in some years they've had, I don't know if it's National Honor Society students offer babysitting services for a period of time. I think those are great options for families. So I think some of those barriers that, we could kind of cut back on just to make it more accessible for people.
We're wrapping it up pretty soon. Facebook.
Yeah.
How does that play a role? Because it's pushing and turning and the pulse of anything. And some days it gets downright nasty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's scared good candidates out by Facebook posts. And
right.
How does it play a role in education? Because every student that I know either has this, by the way, it just rang and I thought I had shut off, or my tablet's in the car. We live with it. We become, it's a part of my everyday world, because I mean, once I left at home, went to a trade show in Las Vegas. I was on the plane. My wife called and said, Bob, you left it. I called the iPhone store in the Forum Shops at Caesars, and when I got there, it was already downloaded, and I was ready to go to the class.
Yeah.
So it's become a way of life. How do you think that affects education? Because we have students at Whitman Hanson that all have one-on-one devices now.
Yeah. I mean, I think technology, like many things, is a blessing and a curse. I think that many of our, our students have access to social media and to technology. And I think that during the pandemic, that was a way to keep our kids connected with their peers and supported in a social way that was really hard to do in person. I think that those things, that is a factor kind of to the extent to which it's prevalent for students now. I think that it's certainly not the only piece. I think technology has been, taking on more and more of a role in our lives and our children's lives in general, but I think that's a piece. The students that I work with are elementary level, so most of them don't have social media accounts, fortunately. But I think that, from a parent's perspective, as a parent of teenagers, like kind of being mindful and giving our kids, to go back to kind of my initial comment, giving our kids some critical thinking skills and some analysis to be able to discern what is true or what feels true and what feels like it's maybe not true or something that I want to understand better. Not taking things at face value, like questioning things appropriately. I think all of those things are important factors in education and parenting and in life. And I think from a running from a candidate perspective, I think that social media can be tricky, right? Again, like I think we've seen amazing communication happen in communicating things out in a very fact-based way. But I also think that you could say anything behind a keyboard. So you have to make sure that what's being communicated and what's you're internalizing is accurate information. So.
Right back to critical thinking. Yeah. But we're at the point of where we've got to end. It's hard to believe it went this quick.
Yes, it did.
So, Kara.
Yeah.
Look into the camera and tell the voters why they should vote for Kara Moser. And thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
We're all volunteers. That's the key thing that people need to remember.
Yes.
You, myself, people on select boards, school committees, we're all volunteers. We do it for free. Yep. Tell them why you want that seat.
Sure. So I think I've communicated that I have committed so much of my life is around supporting our children and supporting our children educationally, but also as people and future leaders. I think those people that know me in both communities would say that, especially when it comes to education, everything that I communicate, every decision I make, I try to make with integrity and from a point of what's best for kids. So I think that I'm really excited about this opportunity. I'm really hopeful. I think I have a unique perspective to add, and I think my ability to collaborate is really something that could add to the committee. So.
Well, thank you, Kara.
Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you for coming in today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is kind of the end of our show. As I end all shows, I would love your input. We need your input. If you have a question, no matter what it is, if you want to call me on my cell phone, my number is 617-538-0189. If you want to contact me by electronic mail, bobhayes4433@gmail.com. As I said, we're changing, bringing on a little bit. We're going to try to bring some educational shows that will help you with your taxes, with your home assessment, to give you a better idea of things that are going on in town. I'm going to try to bring some assessors in, bring some other people in to give you some free knowledge on what exactly happens in these two beautiful communities that we live in, Whitman and Hanson. Thank you for watching Bring It On. We'll see you next time.